My mother was there for, I think, 4 years. She absolutely loved every split second. And in her old age, at the drop of a hat, she would tell people she hardly knew. I went to Sacré-Cœur, you know. It was a wonderful school. And she did that so often. I can't really accept it. Aunt Berry also went there, but she hardly ever talked about it. I was terribly, terribly homesick, but I was allowed to keep my koala bear purse in the dormitory, and I was allowed to keep my Bakelite doll, and everybody was kind to me, and the nuns were kind. After I'd been there about a week, the second in command told me to come to her office. So I went along, and she asked me how I liked the school. She was very calm, and I burst into tears and said that the bread tasted like rags. So she talked quietly to me. She didn't make any comment about that. Talked very quietly to me for a while, gave me a sweet, and for the next 9 years I stayed on at the school and got used to the bread and everything else. They were all interesting women. A lot of them were great, great fun. A lot of them had huge, huge humour and were very smart indeed. And a lot of them were just very quiet and kind and everything else. When I was a junior, I was put in the corner frequently in the little study room for talking or laughing. And of course I was a giggler, and after a while I'd go over and I would apologise, and a kid at the back of the room would suddenly make a sign or something, and of course I'd get the giggles again, go back into the corner, Jean. So back I'd go into the corner. But I was having a ball all the time, really. Our punishments were dry bread at a separate table at afternoon tea time, or dry bread in a little cubby hole where there was a table covered in black, black stuff. And it was en route from the nuns' dining room to the rest of the school. And so when you were sitting there, I didn't care. I didn't mind being away from people. I don't depend on people. And they would come through one after the other from having had their lunch, and with various responses to this child. All this sort of thing. And I didn't like it when my special nun went by, but she didn't actually do anything. She walked past me with her eyes cast down, and I was often at that little black table, and it was always for talking, always, until the time I told her, this is when I was much older, I told a girl that Mother Vavasor had been engaged in the 1914-18 war. And my best friend, who remained my best friend and died last year, reported it to a snoopy little nun who just entered the order. And she punished me. I was told that never in my life was I ever say anything like that ever again. And I was put into solitary confinement. Again, it didn't worry me. And the other wonderful thing was, they thought if they sent me down the front staircase, away from the rest of the school, that would be a terrible punishment. But to me, it was like being the Governor General's wife or something. I was walking up and down the front staircase. I was sent one night, again for talking, into the luggage room, down some stairs away from the dormitory, and the nun would have no idea. I don't feel any animosity to her at all. I was absolutely terrified because of all the shadows. in this room with pale electric light and things, so I stopped talking that night. So you see, the whole time there was always this constant supervision, constant gentleness. One of the rules of the order was that no corporal punishment was ever to be used. And I didn't really know that until I was in my 60s or my 70s, and I read it in one of the rule things. The joys for me, we had beautiful music, and when I was older we had wonderful people lecturing us, and here again is the subtlety of the nuns. The only really painful punishment I had was, I don't know what I'd done, but I couldn't go to the lecture. And I remember that still. The chapel to me was, and still is, the most beautiful, beautiful place. And on very special days, the whole chapel sanctuary would be absolutely blazing with candles, as in this photo. I mean, everything was done, for beauty. It was just incredible. And then we had the lantern thing, which was once a year. And when I went back as a boarder mistress, one of the special things for me was on the night of the lantern procession, when we got up to the chapel door, I would open the door and they would see this sort of thing, and they each had one of these wonderful, wonderful lantern things, and I used to just watch their faces. And ugly kids and pretty kids and all the rest of it, they were, absolutely entranced. But the chapel had a huge influence on me, an enormous influence, and I think it did on everybody. And then in it was my last year at school, I suddenly began to hate everybody. And I don't really know where the gift came from, but I had enough gumption to go to the second in command, who was another woman who became a very great friend of mine later. And I knocked on her door and she, "Come in." So I went in and she said, "What is it, dear?" And I said, "I hate everybody." "Oh," she said, "right. Well, go to the holiday cupboard, get the key from Sister So-and-so and take out a holiday book, go down to the pantry and get an apple and an orange from the sister down there, and go up to Sacré-Cœur. And you can stay up there all day. And when you come down, if you feel like gardening, do some gardening." It was all treated in the same way that the bread had been. Calm. Nothing was said, I mean, today they'd say, "Oh, you better get a counsellor in," and all this sort of thing. So, with great aplomb, feeling very dignified and special, I went up to Sacré-Cœur. I stayed up there till about afternoon tea time, but I was getting a bit hungry by then. I came down, had afternoon tea in complete silence, all the kids looking at me, went down into the garden, did some gardening, and they all went past to go and play games and things. I completely ignored them. And it was all fixed up. And I knew that I could get on to the end of the year and I'd be leaving school and I wasn't going to cry like anybody else. Everybody, they used to go up to the chapel and weep volumes the last night at school. I didn't do any of that. I wasn't going to do that. And the same nun said to me, "Wait till you get to the front door." And I think I did do a bit of a boo-hoo there.